Hello, everybody. My name is David Laney. Welcome back. I'm with a good friend of mine, Jacob Brinkman, an intern from Cardinal Health. Welcome, Jacob.
Hello, thanks for having me, David.
Jacob, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do an interview for us. I think these students of ours are going to be really impressed by the insights that you can provide as to how to get an internship at Cardinal Health. So let's go ahead and get started. Why Cardinal Health?
Yeah, so obviously a question you're going to get asked right off the bat by the company, so this is a good one to know. For me, personally, I always wanted to have a career where I felt like I was helping people in some sort of way. So Cardinal Health really touches the patient from the whole continuum of care. That's kind of like the buzzword in Cardinal Health. You know, they're in 85% of hospitals and thousands of pharmacies globally. And then not to mention the business side, a top 15 Fortune 500 company. So having like that business aspect and that aspirations of mine also with passions of helping people is really why I wanted to work for Cardinal Health and kind of what stuck out to me. So it's a little bit about that.
Absolutely, and we were actually lucky enough to have our club host George Barrett, the former CEO of Cardinal Health, to our campus. So we definitely appreciate Cardinal Health as well. Probably not as much as you do with your summer internship. So how did you go about finding this job?
Right. So I would say I first found out about Cardinal Health my freshman year. I was just in an undergraduate finance association club, I think it was, and speakers came in to talk about it and really just piqued my interest right off the bat. But really, they don't really look for freshmen or sophomores for interns. So kind of rolling around by the time of junior year, building up like networking and everything else that goes along with getting that internship. And I applied online through their website. I think they eventually had some ways you can apply on Handshake, but I know they post them first on the website. So that's what I did real early on. I think it was like in early September, I think is when I first applied.
Okay, awesome. And then also, can you clarify what position did you apply for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a marketing and finance major. So I'm actually really interested in starting my career off on the marketing and sales side of things. So I applied for the marketing internship, and they have a bunch of different functions in finance or operations, you name it. But yeah, marketing was kind of where I wanted to go. So that's the function that I chose to apply for.
So once you hit that submit button, what happened next?
Yeah, so it was actually a while before I heard anything. I think it was about maybe not until late October, I would say, when I got an email that I was going to get a phone interview.
Question, when did you first apply?
Yeah, so I want to say it was, if not earlier, it was like early September, maybe even in August, because I was actually really interested, like I said, in Cardinal Health early on. So I had reached out to a couple of people that I knew that worked for Cardinal even before then, and they said apply as early as possible because they start, I would even say, late summer in August posting their internship. So if you kind of look on their website and just keep tabs with what they're posting, you'll find what you're looking for eventually. So that's kind of what I did.
Absolutely. All right. So they hit you with a phone interview, the email. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I received an email saying that I'd been selected for initial preliminary phone interview, basically. And that would last about 30 minutes. And so it was in, I think, less than a week. So I didn't have much time to reply and really prep for the interview because it had been about a month and a half at least, maybe even more since I originally applied. So you never know if you're going to get it or not. I would say don't lose hope because you kind of always want to keep pressing on why I wanted Cardinal Health and what Cardinal Health does so that you're not cramming last second preparing for an interview. And especially a phone interview when you only have about 30 minutes to really pique their interest and nail that interview.
That's really good advice. By chance, who was that first phone interview with? Was it, a recruiter?
Yeah, so it was lead talent acquisition for their college relations team. Her name's actually Manning, and I still am in good contact with her, and she kind of coordinated the second round interviews as well. So usually it'll be the head of the college relations team that'll reach out and usually do the phone interview if they have time, but they'll definitely be the ones that's reaching out to you.
So how does that actual first phone interview look like? For a lot of these students, it'll be the first time applying to a Fortune 500 company like Cardinal Health. What does that first phone interview look like?
Right. So I would say for me, I had a couple other phone interviews before then, so I kind of understood what that process looked like, and it wasn't very different from a lot of smaller companies that I had phone interviews with. They will ask you, why Cardinal Health, why this marketing position, where do you see yourself 5 years out of college, just kind of trying to get to know you better and making sure you'd be at least a good fit for an interview. And it's really just a quick 30 minutes, and you definitely want to know your stuff about the company. Try and put in like little tidbits of knowledge showing that you've done your research here and there, and just really showing as much as you can through the phone that you're excited about this position, because that's not always, it's really hard to, kind of gauge how the recruiter's feeling on the phone on the other side. I personally would much rather do a face-to-face conversation like we're doing right now. You can kind of gauge whether the recruiter's interested or not. It's really hard over the phone, so just being as excited about the position as possible, I would say, is really big for a phone interview.
That's also a really sound piece of advice. So, you finished this 30-minute phone interview, Ashley. What are the next steps?
Yeah, so I would say, kind of tracking back even before the phone interview, definitely trying to get your networking connections. I would say that's something that separated myself because I reached out before even the phone interview in late summer through a family friend connection through my business fraternity actually that worked at Cardinal Health. And I was able to go to Cardinal Health and have a coffee chat with him, and he gave me a tour, kind of getting off track, but back on track to right after that phone interview. I sent my connection, hey, I just had a phone interview with Ashley Manning. Do you know her? If so, I would appreciate if you put in a good word for me. It would mean a lot. So things like that is what I did. And then about like 2 weeks later, I got notified that I was going to be moving on to the final round interviews, and then I had about a week to prepare for those.
And that's also a really good piece of insight, and we'll definitely touch on that later as well, about what you did, with AKSI as well. Yeah. So you just got notified that you've got these second round interviews. Obviously you're extremely excited. I know I keep asking you, what are the next steps? What are the next steps?
Yeah, so getting that final round interview is really, really exciting, like you said, but it's also intimidating. For Cardinal Health, they give you a whole rundown of what that day is going to look like, and it's pretty much it was an all-day thing. It was kind of from about 8:30 to 1, I would say, where on the plan document or whatever that they email you for the final round. So I got to see that tour. I had a writing assessment. I had 2 interviews. So seeing all that can kind of be overwhelming, but just, trusting yourself and then doing your research again, really making sure you got your interview questions down, because as you even know, and a lot of people that are interviewing for internships, kind of throughout your interview process, you have your answers pretty much down pat. So making sure you have those down before the final round is definitely big.
And I know a little bit before, we talked about an experience, of you just kind of like in the lobby or in the waiting room. Hopefully you just touched on that.
Yeah, definitely. So one of my favorite memories is when I finally get to the second round interview. I walked in the lobby and, another tidbit of advice, you definitely want to be social with the other applicants. I think that's something that stood out for me because a lot of people were being really quiet, and the recruiters are watching you. They're sitting right at the end of that table. They might not seem like they are, but they're definitely seeing how you would be a culture fit. But anyways, I was, the first girl I meet, I'm asking her where she's from and what position, and she was like, oh, I go to Princeton. I was just flown in, got Mercedes, picked me up from the hotel and brought me to the interview. And so hearing that was kind of intimidating, just being the first person that I meet, getting flown in all the way from the East Coast for this interview and interviewing for the same spot essentially that I was. So there's always going to be little fun tidbits in your interview that you'll see. So.
Absolutely. So like you said, you were able to keep your cool, to maintain that into the morning. How did that morning look in that, that second round interview once you get past the lobby and your friends in there?
Yeah, so like I said, we were kind of in the room. I was making conversations with a lot of people. They did like a quick 20-30 minute overview of what Cardinal Health was, which, at that point, if you didn't know a lot of that information, like what were you doing there in that interview? So it wasn't that helpful, but then we went and had back-to-back 30-minute interviews, and that was kind of challenging.
Who were those with by chance?
Yeah, so they were with 2 senior marketing managers. So they could have possibly been my manager for the summer. They didn't end up being, but there were 2 professional marketers for Cardinal Health. And I would say the way at least Cardinal Health did it is the first interview is almost like an easier interview than the second one. So similar questions, real similar questions, but the way they interact, they set it up so, they're really agreeing with you. You're really, at least for me, I was really vibing great with the first interviewee, and it was all smiles. I felt, like I just nailed the interview. And then the second one, kind of polar opposite. They're disagreeing with little, particulars that you're saying. They're not smiling back at you. You're asking, would I be a good fit, or how did I do in the interview? And they're responding, oh, you seem nervous. Like, that's literally what the response was at the end of my second interview. And so I was like, not great feedback, but hope for the best. So for Cardinal Health at least, and I talked to other interns, and it was pretty similar. They had one where they vibed really great, and the second one was kind of a hardball. They were trying to be hard on you and kind of see how you react, I think, in a hard interview environment. So that's kind of how those 2 interviews went.
Sure. So you mentioned that you had the first 2 interviews. What are the next steps after that?
So then we had 2 people in Cardinal Health's Emerge program, they call it, which are basically just recent graduates. Give us a tour, kind of answer any questions we might have, give us any advice. And then they pretty much wrapped it up, and that was pretty much the extent of that.
Awesome. So how do they tell you that you'd be notified whether or not you'd make the job? Do they tell you how many interns they were taking? What information were you given?
So, yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So I remember asking one of the Emerge candidates who was an intern this past summer, how many marketing interns. And so she told me that they took 12 last summer and that they're probably looking to take the same, if not a little bit more. They don't tell you, the recruiters don't actually tell you in the room, but you can kind of get the younger people that work there that were interns and whatnot. And then the recruiters told me that they would give me a phone call, and I think I would know in a week and a half or 2 weeks if I'd gotten the job or not. And it was kind of really stressful, actually, because I remember it was coming up on that 2 weeks and got an email that they're going to need more time and they're going to have to extend the deadline. So it ended up being, I think, about 3 I had gotten an offer. But yeah, so that stuff varies.
Wow, that's a great story. Of course, it sucked you had to wait, but I mean, definitely worth the wait.
Right.
So they send you the offer in email. Is there a certain time frame, or how does that work?
So I think it was a little bit different for me because I knew I really wanted to work for Cardinal Health. They ask you if you have any other pending offers, and they were really flexible. Like, how much time do you need? For me, I told them I don't need much time. Like, I'm pretty certain I'm going to accept. So it was a little different from my perspective.
Sure.
But I think in general, like 2 to 4 weeks is normal, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations again on your marketing analyst intern role.
Thank you.
So let's touch back a little bit more on like your actual college experience. What are the steps you took to actually hit the submit button for your application? For instance, how do we start about going about your resume? What classes did you take, freshman, sophomore, junior year?
Yeah, so I came into Ohio State, like a lot of people, kind of like business undecided, and chose finance right off the bat. Wasn't really sure why at the time. And then I decided that I was also interested in the marketing and sales side of things, but I really wanted that finance background and to have that finance degree. I thought it'd give me a leg up later in life when I would apply for a leadership position or things like that. So I decided to stick with finance as well. And I went to my guidance counselor a couple times to see if it was possible to be able to do finance and marketing. And I think that's what helped me out is I realized freshman year that's kind of what I want to do. So I was able to knock out a lot of those prereqs and not really take that many credit hours. I only came in with 6 credit hours. I think I took 3 credit hours of a summer course. And then the general, about 16 credit hours each semester. So it's really possible to dual specialize in Fisher. It's just you kind of have to know what you want to do and knock out those prereqs. So, for example, sophomore year, I had to make sure I took finance and marketing, those courses, so that I would get into all my finance classes for junior year, and then as well be able to apply for marketing halfway through junior year to be into those classes senior year. So the dual specialized process is kind of confusing with how Ohio State does it, with how they make you do one at a time. But it's not really hard to do, if that makes sense. It's just they make it kind of confusing.
And I think a big point of advice you brought up there, too, was the fact that you went to your counselor early. Being a freshman or sophomore, sometimes you can really be intimidated to use that resource. But, getting that layout early, you also helped, knowing that you knew what you wanted to do. You put that 2 together to get those 2 degrees, in 4 years, which is super impressive as well.
I would, just to echo that, definitely going to your guidance counselor and trying to fill out one of those roadmaps, if you know what I'm talking about, where you fill out all the courses you need to take or want to take. And, I did that at the very end of my freshman year and just kind of laid out and saw, okay, this is possible as long as I just, go about and follow this plan. So I definitely recommend that.
Absolutely. So how did you become involved? Obviously, you have to take classes and build up your GPA and be successful in that regard. But how do you become a well-rounded student?
Yeah, definitely. So I think being well-rounded in involvement is just as important, if not more important, than your GPA. That's how I view things personally. So coming into college, I got pretty involved right away. I was involved in student government right away in my fall semester. Did that my freshman and sophomore year, pretty involved in that. And then at the end of my freshman year, I joined a Greek organization, Beta Theta Pi, on campus. And right away, I was interested in leadership positions. So my sophomore year, I was one of 9 members on the executive board, where I got to serve with the David Laney right over there as well. But that was a great experience, getting to be in a leadership position so early on in my college career. I feel like really helped me and gave me valuable talking points. And then I would say my third main involvement was also getting involved more within Fisher and the business fraternity side. So I also joined Alpha Kappa Psi, and that gave me a lot of great just resume and interview tips and networking overall. Really boosted from that, I would say, and I've held a couple of chair positions within that as well. So just being really involved and well-rounded, I would say, is as important, if not more important than your GPA, because companies, they don't want just a person with a 4.0. I don't think, any company is going to hire you if you have no involvement in just a 4.0. So I would highly recommend getting involved on campus if you can.
I totally agree. And then just kind of a few questions to kind of wrap up here. Do you have any of those aha moments or any of those moments of, great advice that you have that, maybe set you apart from other candidates or really helped you out with the step forward in this journey?
Yeah, so I think how I want to answer that, I would go back to the networking aspect, because it's really hard to put yourself out there and reach out to these people that you've never met and ask them for help, because that's kind of made my first connection within Cardinal Health. It was, like I said, through a family friend of a friend, basically, their parent that I met at an event, and I was super interested in Cardinal Health, and I made a really good relationship with that person, and they sent an email connecting me to someone who works in business development at Cardinal Health, who happens to be really into mentoring and the intern program. And so he agreed to meet with me on a coffee chat, and, he went way over and beyond what I would expect, from a person that I just met. He gave me lots of little notebooks about information of Cardinal Health and just advice that I could go about using for my internship application process. And, he also said it's a hard process, so don't get down if you don't get it, all this stuff. There's so many opportunities out there for young people. Anyway, he wrote a recommendation email to not only a recruiter that I had the phone interview with, but as I mentioned, she was also the head of the college relations team. And then he also wrote emails to the 2 marketing managers that I interviewed with. He asked me who I interviewed with, and I asked him if he knew them. And if he did, maybe he could put in a good word or say hi for me, hoping. And
Sure.
He said he'd never met them, but he was writing them in emails. And again, this was somebody I just met for an hour one day. And for him to even take the time to give me a tour in early September, just because I was interested. So I would say that the biggest aha is put yourself out there, because you really don't know when you're going to meet someone that's going to help you out so much. Because like I said, I think that was what really separated me, because I think companies, they want to hire interns that they can hire full time, which I know is every goal of an intern. So they're not going to hire people just based on GPA or just based on involvement. If they have, recommendations or people that work at that company that they trust that are recommending these candidates, I think that goes a long way in the interview process. So that would be my biggest advice, because I also reached out to another worker that I knew at Cardinal. So just reaching out to as many people as I could and getting basically those emails or whatever you want to call it, recommendations, I would say set me apart, and was my aha moment, if you will.
Absolutely. One other question to ask you, is there anything that you'd have done differently, looking back on now that you have the job?
So obviously getting the position, it's easy to say I wouldn't want to change anything, because right now I'm enjoying my summer in week 4, so not really a whole lot that I would change. I do remember a point in the phone interview process where they asked me about where I see myself in 5 years, kind of what I want to do with my career. And I remember not answering that the best way. I said, I'm sort of interested in business sales and also finance. And I think a big thing to remember is that if you're interviewing for marketing or a marketing internship, they're looking for the best marketing candidate. So that best, prospect that's great at marketing. They're not looking for somebody that's good at finance and marketing, even though that will diversify you and I think helped me land the position. But, saying that you're interested in marketing and, you want to do brand management or product management in marketing, I think would have been the better answer for that question. So that's one thing that I would have changed on my phone interview at least.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, I think that's all the questions that I have on my end. Thank you again, Jacob Brinkman, the marketing analyst intern at Cardinal Health, for taking the time today for interview with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. I think you got a great thing going on at the CEO Club, so I appreciate the time, man.
I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Take it easy.